We're here on the Made It Music podcast with my friend Clay Hunnicutt, who's the president of Big Loud Records. Clay, you are a busy man. Big Loud's taking over the world of country music, and just really appreciate you taking the time to come by the show today.
Oh, happy to be here. Thanks. I look forward to it.
Yeah. Well, let's just dive straight in. What was the first moment that music impacted you to where you knew that you wanted to pursue it as your career?
I mean, I always loved music. The house I grew up in with my mom and my brother, music was such an important part of our lives. And my mom was a big music fan, so there was always music playing. There was always something going on in the house. And then my brother, who's 3 years older than me, he turned me on to Van Halen and Styx and some of the other rock bands of that generation. And I always loved music. I think the moment, though, where I knew when I got into the business and got into radio, that's when it really tripped the trigger for me big time. I was an intern in college. I was doing an unpaid internship at a country station in Chattanooga, a station called US 101. And that's where I truly fell in love and said, I want to make the music business my career in one way or the other, was just because then you're around artists nonstop. You're around the music all the time. And that's where I really got the fever, I think. So about my second or third year in college and with an internship. So it was really where it kind of turned for me.
Yeah. Well, one thing that I appreciate about you is you've used this term that I feel like over and over again, that it's about controlling your own destiny, writing your story. Can you talk about how maybe the phases of your career going through radio and now being at Big Loud, how did that chronologically unfold?
Well, I think it started in college with the internship I was doing. I'd done an internship with a TV station in Chattanooga, and then I did the internship at US 101, and that's where I really kind of figured out. I knew when I finished the internship in TV, I knew that wasn't for me. It wasn't fast enough. It wasn't energetic enough. There wasn't enough. There just wasn't enough energy there. And when you went into a radio station, there was. And so really felt compelled to jump into that. So that was the first moment. I think the next moment was, making a decision to leave Chattanooga and go to Cleveland, Ohio and run a station called WGAR. And we knew nobody. My wife and I knew nobody in Cleveland. And it was just one of those situations that it was a great opportunity. And I knew that if we got there and we did our job and we did a really good job of resurrecting a great radio station, because I think it was 10th or 11th in the market when we got there. When I left, it was number one. So that was a great success. And that enabled me to go on and run WSIX in Nashville. And then Atlanta, we launched the Bull.
Which I don't just want to skip over that too, because for a lot of the listeners who maybe not be familiar with that, WSIX, I mean, that's you're in the king of country music.
Yeah, you're
radio,
in the hub
right?
of it. And there was some of the great experiences there. I certainly got to work with Jerry House, one of the greatest air personalities that I've ever been around, one of the most creative individuals. And I think in every situation, you learn things as you go that you'll repeat and things that you won't repeat. But WSIX is a legendary radio station and has been the home to so many, many great people and has done so many great things. And then obviously leaving there and going to Atlanta to launch the Bull, and creating something from scratch that did not exist one day and it did the next, is a pretty amazing experience. Can
you speak to why you did that? Obviously, you can kind of rest on your laurels a little bit and get comfortable in a position, and you're at this great network. Why leave and go from number one to whatever Atlanta's market was?
I think for me, everybody's different. For me, it is about taking risks, educated risks. And I think that's the thing I would say is I call it stepping off the ledge, because I could have stayed at WSIX for the rest of my life and would have been very happy and that would have been great. But I'm not driven that way. I don't, I love the creation process, and I love the opportunity to start something from scratch and then watch it grow and build it up. There's no better satisfaction now as a label president to stand at the mixing board of at front of house at a show and watching Chris Lane or Morgan Wallen or even Jake Owen sing the songs that we worked with them on and that they created, but we went out and worked and promoted and built up and had a number one or a top 10, and watching the fans sing that back to them. That's got to be an incredible, I've never been an artist, so I don't know what that feels like standing on the stage. I know it's pretty special when you're standing in the crowd. But the same way when I was in radio is the same thing. When you see the impact that a radio station makes, and it's a radio station that you helped create, that you helped develop, and that you put all these plans in place, that's a pretty special feeling for the impact that it makes. But I think, again, for me, it's about the creation process. It's really about, I get bored after a couple of 2 or 3 years because once you've done things. Okay, this is the 4th or 5th time I've done this. You kind of say, okay, I need to do something different. I need that energy. I need to be creating something else or something that really interests me because I feel like I've been there, done that. And so I think, when you're on the label side, it's different because every artist is different. And it's, even though we've launched artists and we've done things, and we've done some amazing things, every artist has their differences, and it's a new approach and it's a new way, and their vision is different and things like that. And it's no different than a radio station. So I think when I left WSIX and I went to Atlanta to create that and to work with the team there, and we had some amazing people and we did some great things. Again, it was an educated risk inside the company, knowing if we could go there and develop those radio stations and build them up and really make them great, but it also enabled me to take the next steps, because I had an old boss one time tell me, he's like, don't think about the job you're going for right now. What does that get you in the next 2 jobs? And so have a longer vision of where does that take you? Because if you're just looking at this next step, that gets you to a certain point. But if you boxed yourself in at that point, then what are you going to do? Where do you want to be? Where do you want to be 10 years from now, 12 years from now, 15 years from now? And what do you want to try to do? And so I think that longer vision is some of the reason why I, kind of stepped off the ledge, as I said, to leave a very safe and secure WSIX to go to something that didn't even exist at the time. And those are important to me. Those are things that drive me. Those are really important pieces.
Yeah. And maybe you can clarify that a little bit, because you were, at one point after that, the senior VP of programming at iHeart Clear Channel. How did that kind of happen? Was that as a result of you building the thing up in Atlanta to a point where it just made sense to do that, or how did that whole unfold?
Yeah, I think it was when I left Nashville to go to run Atlanta and to work for iHeart there. It was, at the time, Atlanta was probably one of the top 2 or 3 worst clusters of radio stations in the entire company. And really nobody wanted to take it on. At one time, it was called the Widowmaker, because I think the previous 7 or 8 operations managers had been fired. And I had a bunch of people inside the company saying, don't take that job and stay in Nashville. It's, obviously it's a great city, and, it's WSIX. Why would you want to leave that? But I also knew that if we did a great job there, then it would lead to bigger things for me, for my family, for the company. And I think ultimately it did, because my boss at the time, he left and went to a different company. He was the senior vice president of programming. He left and went to a different company. And so when he left, I took part of his job. And then again, people would say, why would you take that job? Because now it's traveling, you're working with multiple markets, it's 24/7, 365, you can never stop. And that's all true. But I saw it as a way to get where I wanted to go and to be at that moment. And then that led to being an executive vice president of programming with the 850 radio stations, working for the national programming team, which built the iHeart Country Festival, the iHeart Music Festival in Las Vegas, Fiesta Latina. It led to me learning and seeing so much more in my life, which ultimately led me to being more valuable to, being the president of Big Loud.
Yeah, and that's a fascinating story. I'd love for you just to kind of share that. You've shared it with me a little bit offline, but just even how that opportunity came about in the first place?
Yeah, Seth England tells the story very well too. But Seth England is one of the partners at Big Loud, and I knew him through working with Florida Georgia Line. Seth and Chief Zaruk both manage Florida Georgia Line, and so obviously when I was working at iHeart, we had done a lot of things together to help launch their career and to help them with their album launches, and they had played several festivals with us, so got to know them very well in that process. And Seth called me one day out of the blue, and we talked periodically about things they were developing and other artists they were working on as well. But Seth called me one day and said, "Hey, we have a publishing company, we have a management company, we want to start a record label of our own." And I was like, "Oh, well, that's great, that's awesome." And I said, what can I do to help? And he's like, "Well, can you give me recommendations of people that could be great people to run the label for us?" Like, we know nothing about running a record label, so who would that be? So I gave him 4 or 5 great names on the spot and recommended some amazing people that if it was my money and my ball, I would trust. But at the very end of the conversation, I threw him for a little bit of a loop, and I just said, "Hey, I got an odd one for you. What about me?" And he stumbled and stammered a little bit because when the head of iHeart programming says, "Hey, consider me," I'm sure I put him on the spot, and he wasn't intending that. And I told him at the time, I was like, "Hey, look, I'm just throwing it out there. If you go with any of these other individuals, obviously no hard feelings. You do what you need to do for your business, but I'd love to have that conversation." So he went away for about a month. I didn't hear from him, so I thought it was dead. And then he came back about a month later and said, "Hey, were you serious about that, about you?" And I said, "Yeah, very serious, for the right opportunity, the right situation, part ownership. If I had a stake in it, for sure." So he went away for about another month. And so at this point, I'm like, okay, this is really dead. And then he came back and said, "Hey, the partners and I want to sit down and talk to you about this. We're serious about this. We had to get all of our stuff in order because the original 4 partners already existed prior to me." And they said, "We had to get our ducks in a row, but now we're ready to talk." And so then we spent the next 2 to 3 months talking about that and finally put it together. And then I went in and quit my job and left on a journey. My last day at iHeart was on a Thursday, and my first day with Big Loud was the following Monday. So I had a whole 3 days off and left on a 20-week radio tour with Chris Lane. So
what was it about Seth England and their crew that they had at the time, which, if I'm hearing it right, the label wasn't even a thing; it was an idea.
Right, correct.
What was it about them that made you bring that up? Because you talk a lot about like calculated risks.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there had to be enough surety that, hey, this thing it's either going to pan out or it's not. But you felt like, hey, this is going to work.
Well, again, it is about calculated risk. It is about, if you look at the organization, take me out of the picture. You look at the organization. You've got Craig Wiseman, one of the greatest writers Nashville has ever seen, and I think it's 27 or 28 number ones now, and so an amazing and just an amazing person. Forget the number ones. Craig is one of the most generous people I've ever met in my life, and so I knew him a little bit. Then you look at what Seth England has done and working with Craig, and I'm from the publishing side. Chief is manager, extraordinaire. Did all the Nickelback years. Comes with a wealth of experience working with Dallas Smith and FGL and so many others. And then Joey Moy, who produced, all the previous Jake Owen number 1 hits, all the FGL albums, and so much more. I mean, we could spend an hour just talking about Joey, but it's when you look at those 4 individuals, you're like, okay, and we all come from varying backgrounds. And we complement each other. We debate with each other. We come from very different angles. But when I looked at the situation and I looked at the people that were involved and then what we were going to be trying to do, that excited me because it really came, while it was a brand new unknown entity, there were known factors to it that were very substantial, respected, these guys came with a wealth of goodwill already, where people are like, oh, I love them, and oh, I love Craig, and man, Seth is smart and he's on it, and Joey Moy is just amazing in the studio, and all this, and so you start looking at that diversity of that group, of the group of five of us, and it's pretty exciting stuff. It's not that hard to make that to make that transition or to think about it that way.
Yeah, well, that makes total sense, and yeah, you're obviously in great company there. I want to back up to that conversation a little bit in the month that followed. If you're pursuing, if somebody is pursuing a position really anywhere, how do you appropriately pitch yourself? I know there's a little bit of an art to that. Sounds like for you it's just a pretty organic part of the conversation, but if there's a listener out there that's wondering, how do I go about pursuing a job or an interview or anything like that, how do you set yourself up to win?
I think the very first thing I would say, get to know as many people as you possibly can. Nashville and the music industry especially, it's all about who you know. I mean, it really is. Whether you're an artist, whether you're a writer, whether you're trying to get a job in the business and working in the digital department, working, being a film editor or whatever it is, whatever the job is, it's really, you obviously have to know your craft. You have to be a student of the game, but you also have to get to know people, because a lot of the, like at Big Loud, I think 5 or 6 people that work for us now were interns. And just get your foot in the door and show people what you can do, or get to know them to where, people say, you know what, I really like them. I think they're respected. And I think it's just getting to know people as much as humanly possible. And then the other thing I would tell people is, don't be afraid to do anything. I mean, when I started in the business, I would do anything. I would empty the trash cans. There's nothing. I mean, even now as the president of the record label, and we're such a tight group that, if I'm walking across the parking lot and there's a box in the parking lot that needs to go in the garbage can, I pick it up and throw it in the garbage can. It's like, don't be afraid. Nobody's too good to do anything. I see a lot of people today that are trying to start in the business, and there's things they don't want to do. And I don't understand that. As like, if you want to be in this business bad enough and you want it bad enough, you'll do what it takes. And I see a lot of that today, where people don't want to, and they want to come in and they want to make 6 figures right out of the gate. And I'm only working these hours and things like that. And it's like, this is a passion project. This is not this is a lifestyle. This is not a job. And it is, and it's important for people to understand that. But I think, going back to the root of your question, get to know everybody you can, because it wouldn't have happened for me if I hadn't known Seth. If we hadn't nurtured that relationship a year and a half before he ever called asking for suggestions, A, he wouldn't have called me for recommendations, and B, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to drop that on him in that moment. And then if I hadn't known him, then he wouldn't have followed up and said, hey, were you serious? And he wouldn't have known my past and my career path, and hopefully that I did it right for the 24 years before he came along, and things like that. And so I think it all came from me knowing him and working well together and having a respect for what they built, him having a respect for how I worked, and that kind of stuff, or never would have happened. And that's any job I've had. I mean, I got WSIX and those jobs because of the bosses that I had that believed in me, and because I had done everything they had asked me to do, and they trusted me and respected my work. And I liked working with them. And then when I went to Atlanta, it's because the boss I had in Nashville had moved up in the company, and he was asking me to take on one of the biggest tasks in the company. And it's because he knew the work, but I had also done everything he'd asked me to do. And again, but it's because I knew somebody, and you work hard. And those are the 2 basic fundamentals. It's not brain surgery. It's just, work your butt off.
Yeah, that's good. Well, and that's a kind of a common thread that we're uncovering a lot on the podcast, is how much of it is just about the relationship.
Right.
And relationships are a long game. It's not, You don't just
Well,
move
but
to
it's no
town
different. It's no different than, Jake Owen. The Jake Owen signing for Big Loud was really big. I mean, I knew Jake as an artist from the radio side from the day he started. And then I knew his manager, Keith Gale and Ando. I've known them for a long time. And Keith was worked for Sony for a lot of years. And so when it happened very similar to how it happened me coming to Big Loud. When Jake announced that Keith, Gale, and Ando were going to be his new managers, and Keith was leaving Sony to do that, I called and congratulated Keith because I've known him for 20 years. And then I said, hey, just happened to say, hey, you know what? If Jake Owen is ever a free agent, you know what a fan I am. Joey Moy produced 5 of his current, at the time, 6 number ones. Let's put the band back together. And he was like, okay, that sounds great. And that kind of stuff. Well, about 6 months later, he reaches out and said, hey, were you serious about that? And I said, yeah, we were serious about that. Are you? And he said, yes. And so we started talking. And then 4 or 5 months later, we wound up signing Jake Owen. And here we are a year and a half later. But it's one of those deals where it's just because of you knew somebody, called to congratulate them, made a comment. 6 months later, it rolls back around. It's all about who but Jake wouldn't have come to Big Loud if he and the others had not respected Joey's work, had not known how we do our business, knowing that we would work hard for them and that we would be great partners and those kind of things. So it all goes back to that. It happens every time. If you look at successful stories, that's probably about 90% of how it happens.
That's so good. Well, I want to really drill into what I would love to kind of dive in as the overall theme of this conversation is just something that you're doing very well as a president, is running a successful music company that's actually getting things done. Sounds like when you came in, you came in as a partner. It was like, hey, we're putting this all in on the table, and it's this is a big bet that we're going to make. So can you talk about maybe that early season? What did that look like? What were the conditions when you entered the company? Did you have to pursue outside investment? How did you launch in the first place?
Yeah, when we launched in the first place, it really was the 5 partners, and it was all of our money. There is no outside funding. There is no capital investment from an outside party. We looked at that early, and there were people that came to us and they wanted to invest for a certain percentage of the company, but we wound up saying no, and it all because it was all about control and vision. We kind of had a vision as a group of what we wanted to do and how we wanted to do it, and we didn't want to be beholden to anybody that would have a say in how many artists we signed, what kind of artists we signed, when we released music, how we released music, what music we even cut, or anything. We wanted to develop that, and we didn't want to have that outside person looking over our shoulder, calling the shots or having a say in what we did. And so that was really a fundamental part of starting the company. But when we started the company, we knew that when we shoved all of the money to the center of the table, as it goes, we knew we were fully funded for 4 years, no matter what. And even if we didn't make a dime, we knew we were fully funded for 4 years.
And that's including staffing up and
that's everything. That's all in. So just looking at projections, looking at a basic budget of what we needed to run the operation, and doing a lot of projections of what that was going to take, and that was a lot of the early stages, was really setting those numbers and setting those budgets, and okay, how much are we going to need to pay for this person, that person, what's our rent like, you think about every granular thing you could possibly think about, and how much is it going to take us to cut music and to make videos and all of those kinds of things. And so you take all that into account, look at it of saying, okay, then we think we can, for a year, the first year it's going to cost us this much, the second year it's going to cost us this much, the third year it's going to cost us this much, and the fourth year it's going to be this. Okay, that's the all-in number. Let's make sure we don't start this, because I think what some people have done a disservice to independent record labels, because they start and they get a year into it, and then they're like, okay, this isn't going well, I'm losing too much money, or I can't make it, or I thought this was going to be cheaper, and then they close their doors. And so then people, I think, don't take those seriously. And so ours was, okay, because we're also asking people to come to work for us. and we're asking them to trust us and to buy into the vision.
Yeah. Hey, we're gonna be here tomorrow.
Yeah, right. And it's and look, the thing about people ask me about Big Loud all the time, and why is it such a special place? Every single person on the record label, without a doubt, every single person quit the job they were doing to come work for Big Loud. Stacy Waugh, VP of promotion, left a job with another record label to come do that. Allie McCoskey, that she was a national at another record label. Candace Watkins was in the marketing department at Universal Music Group. Patch Culbertson, VP of A&R, was working for Republic New York. All of these people had really good jobs. And myself, leaving iHeart, I could have stayed there for the rest of my career if I'd wanted to. But there was a vision, there was a belief, and people wanted to do something different and really make an impact and have a life outside of that. And so it's really important. So from a partner standpoint, we have to be able to reassure them, if you come with us, we're going to be here. This is not a fly-by-night thing. And so that was a big part of launching the label and getting people to believe. But we shoved it all in at the center of the table and started developing, started hiring, started building off of that, and really just kind of controlling our own destiny. And that's what we do every day, because the artists we sign, we don't sign fast. We only have, I think there's 7 artists on the label now, and we're 3.5 years in. There are some labels that have signed 7 artists this year, and so we're not trying to find things. We're not trying to throw things against the wall. Let's sign 12 things and hope that 3 things stick. Because we're asking, just like we asked the staff to leave their jobs to come work with us, and they did. We're asking artists to trust us with their career and to trust us for the next 3 to 5 years, because what you put out there, everybody sees, and it's all about credibility and being able to say, this is who we are, this is what we do, and we're making a commitment to the artist. The artist Hardy that we just signed and we just started releasing music on last October, we're going to release 20 songs over 12 months on him. And it's because we believe in him as an artist, as a complete artist, not as one song. It would be doing a disservice to him to say, hey, sign with Big Loud, and we're going to put out one song and let's see how that goes. Why would he ever do that? I don't understand that, but we see it every day.
Man, I have so many follow-up questions.
Sorry, I know I'm throwing a bunch of, I'm just spewing a bunch of stuff at you.
It's like drinking from a fire hose. It's awesome. So many follow-up questions. Let's start with this. It sounds like you made a clear distinction, because there really are a couple ways of doing it. Like, as a label or manager is really just to sign a bunch of stuff, put a little bit into each one, don't spend too much money on either one, put it out, see what sticks, and then put your money behind that. Then there's the other side, which it sounds like your philosophy is, don't sign a lot of stuff, be really, really sure, have some internal, whatever it is, proof of concept, enough of that to where you're going to do a few of them and you're just going to put all your chips on the table there. What is that vetting process like for you? What are maybe talk about some of the metrics that you look for? Are there metrics? Is it more of a gut feeling? How do you evaluate that?
Yeah, I think it's pieces of each one of those that you mentioned. Nowadays there are so many metrics out there, and with artists releasing independent music on their own without a record label, so sometimes you can see it that way. There's also a huge networking factor to where we found a few artists from publishers, where publishers have come to us and said, hey, we've been working with this artist, and they're ready to be an artist. They've been writing for the last 2 years, and we feel like that they've got a great stable of music.
What would be some examples of those that maybe a publisher has brought to you?
I think Hardy was certainly one of them. I mean, that started as a relationship from writing, because we were being pitched songs by Hardy, and he wrote Simple, a #1 for FGL. He wrote Up Down, but that was a #1 for Morgan Wallen with featuring FGL. He wrote I Don't Know About You, that is the current Chris Lane single. And then we were hearing other songs, so we were being pitched his songs, and it was one of those. And we kept asking, it's like, okay, hey, who's the guy singing the demo? And it was one of those things where, and they were like, well, that's his name is Michael Hardy. We call him Hardy, and they were like, well, that's Michael Hardy. And then we got to know him, and he got to hanging around, and then he started co-writing with Morgan Wallen and FGL and those guys, and they were like, man, we love this guy. That he is amazing. I mean, he's really great and he's dynamic. And so we just started talking to him as, hey, do you want to be an artist? And it took a little bit, because at first he was like, no, I don't, that's not what drives me. And then the more we talked and the more he kind of told us of his vision of what he wanted to do, it kind of became clear that was a great next step for him. Morgan Wallen, not that different. At the time, we were being pitched songs by him, for him, where the publisher would come in and say, hey, here's these songs. We want Chris Lane or somebody else on your roster to cut these songs. And we kept going back. It's like, but is that who's that singing the demo? And they were like, well, that's Morgan. And we're like, okay, let's get Morgan in here and let's talk to him about the vocal. The songs are great. Yeah, we agree the songs are great, but we want to talk to him about something else. And then we've had others brought to us that we didn't sign. We've missed a couple. There were some that we went after pretty hard that we didn't get because somebody brought it. Somebody said, "Oh, you need to see these guys or this girl or that guy," and we went and saw them, liked them, met with them, even made them an offer, and they went somewhere else, and that's okay. We always really think about those as, okay, there's a reason that didn't happen. We don't know what that reason is, but there's a reason that didn't happen. So let's move on. And it's just, you can't dwell in that. But I think, and so we see new artists and get those recommendations from a myriad of ways. Some are from their publishers. Some are from their managers. Managers will call and say, hey, I just signed this new guy or this new girl. I really want you to see them. Or we'll see them at shows. We'll go out to a show and we're intending to see the second or third act. And we see, this person opening the show and we're like, hey, I know I came to see, artist number 3, but artist number 1 is pretty amazing. Let's go talk to her. Let's go talk to him, and really those elements. So I think in this day and time, there are, 7, 8 different sources that you can, you find new artists from. And then it becomes about passion, because we get passionate about it, and then we talk to that person, and if they get our vision and what Big Loud is about, then we'll work together. If they don't, it's okay. It's not for everybody.
So obviously, one part of the attractiveness to some of these people is literally just their voices on these demos. Are these people like? Are there metrics that you kind of look at to go along with that? Like, do you go back and you're like, okay, well, we'll check out his social media if he has X amount of followers? There's that. What are some of those metrics, if any, that you guys look for?
Yeah, the metrics are important, but the first thing we're looking for is voice. The second thing is that little bit of something, that star power in them, because you can always see it when you meet somebody. You go, oh wow, they're dynamic in their own unique way, whatever that happens to be. But there are always metrics involved. Sure, you're looking at their social followings. You're looking at if they've released music. What does that look like? How many followers do they have? Other pieces. You're looking, but we're really looking at everything. We're looking at, and we don't look at one thing in a silo, because there are metrics that will mislead you. And if the person's not great in a room full of people, then I can't fix that. You can work with somebody, and you can certainly try to bring them out of their shell. But there are certain people that walk into the room and they just capture the room, and we've all seen it. And those are dynamic people, and you can't train that. You can try to help bring it out, but you can't train that. And so I think there is clearly a metric universe involved in our world now that is really fantastic, and it does cut down on the misses when you do it right. But at the same time, you're still looking at the person. You're still looking at that one-on-one conversation, and you're getting their vision for who they want to be as an artist and what they want to record and what kind of music do they want to release. And then, every artist is a brand. It is what colors do they like? What does it look like, taste like, smell like, feel like? What's the texture to it? They are Coke. Coke has a brand. It's red, it's white, it's the Coca-Cola, it's legendary, and every artist is that way too. You just got to find that, and we try to elevate. We don't try to replace that or tell them what to do. It's really more about elevating that and bringing that out in them.
Can you talk a little bit about one of the big parts of running a successful music company is obviously overseeing a team that's rowing in the same direction. How do you get the best out of your team members and then spin that into an organization that then attracts great artists and great talent, like from that perspective? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think it starts with hiring good people. I think that is because look, there are people that are experts in their field, and they're just not good fits. We've talked about it when we go to hire somebody, when we look to add to the team now, we really think about the people we're interviewing are clearly good at their jobs, or they wouldn't be in the room. They've proven themselves to be successful in some realm or another. So they've made it to the room. Now, then we're looking at, okay, how does this person fit with us? Do they fit into the family? And we talk about that. It's like, are they going to be productive and energetic and bring, a different perspective? Are they going to be able to, because they're coming into an organization that's already running, and that's never an easy thing. And so are they going to be able to fit in with that group and run as fast as the rest of the team does? So again, once we've done the screening and and if you're sitting in the final room and you and I were interviewing for a job, you've made it past all that point. Now I'm just judging you on, do we feel like that you're going to fit with the rest of the crew and the rest of the family? And if so, then great, let's go together. And if not, then it's just about fit, and it's about fit and form. And so I think so we look at that, but what we're always trying to do, and again, we've just recently added the VP of A&R and Patch Culbertson, and the VP of Marketing of Candace Watkins, and then the national director when Stacy ascended to the VP of Promotion role, and we added Allie. Those were all the discussions about the clearly talented individuals in their own rights. But then it became about, did they want to fit with us, and did they fit our family? And they do, and and they've jumped in and they've brought a whole new element. But then, as a growing company, and sometimes it's a struggle. There are growing pains because you're injecting new people into the system, and they're bringing new thoughts, new ideas, new creation, new ways to do stuff. And when you've created something from scratch, sometimes it's hard to give up the way it's been done. And so you really have to, especially for somebody like me, I mean, I'll be the first one to admit that at times it's hard because we were on the front end and we had to do everything ourselves. Now that there's a full staff, you got to step away and let them do their jobs and let them go run with the ball and trust them to do that. And so sometimes that's hard, especially when you helped create it. And then, even for, Stacy, who was there within a month of us starting the record label, and others that have been there since day one, when new people come in, you really have to try to give them their space. And that's a dynamic that you really have to work through. And there are growing pains with that. It's not all smooth sailing every day.
Yeah, that's good. One of the things that you guys have done really well, and you talked about Chris Lane. As soon as you entered the company, you went on a 20-week radio tour with him, and
yeah, that was fun.
That song ended up becoming y'all's first number one,
correct,
as a label. So you're winning at radio, and that's a big thing that I think a lot of artists have a question mark about because it's so hard nowadays. The space is so crowded. There's so many labels. There's so many great talent out there. So we are going to do if you're cool with it, doing a little postscript deep dive on presenting yourself and setting yourself up to win at country radio.
Sure.
So we'll chat a little bit about that. If people want to check that out, then go to madeitinmusic.com, go to the show notes page, and they can find that there.
Awesome.
But, as we're wrapping up the conversation, I want to dive into what we call our lightning round.
Lightning round.
Number one, best piece of advice ever given to you?
Argue and debate with your boss until they tell you to shut up and go do your job. And then you shut up and go do your job. You got to keep going, man. It's like, I mean, at some point your boss just says, I hear you, but I don't care. Go do what I told you to do. And as an employee, you got to go do that.
Okay. All right. Number 2, favorite Nashville meeting spot.
Ooh, wow. Probably Fenwick's. I like to do breakfasts, and usually I can walk in there and I'll see about 8 people I know. So while I'm having my meeting, I'm also shaking hands and kissing babies.
It's becoming the hot spot over
It
there.
is. It is.
Number 3, most awkward moment being in radio promotions from the other side, like when you were in radio, you were programming. Was there an awkward moment that stands out?
I think the awkward, I think there's not one specifically, but I think it's when an artist comes in, you've been hyped on it so much, and then they kind of crash and burn in front of you. And it's hard to be, that they're sitting there with their dreams raw right in front of you, and you have to find the delicate way to kind of go, that wasn't good. That didn't end well. So there's been several of those over my career.
Yeah, and we'll talk about that in our deep dive of how to not crash and burn in that scenario.
Sure.
Number 4, first song that really impacted your life.
Oh wow, I would probably say Bob Seger and the Silver Bullet Band, Against the Wind. Yeah, that was my second. That was my. I think I was 12 or 13. My mom was a big fan. That was one of my first concerts that I vividly remember was Bob Seger, and to this day, he's absolutely probably top 2 or 3 favorite artists of all time for me.
All right, good call there. And last question in the lightning round: favorite city in the world that working in music has taken you to?
Oh, wow. I got to tell you, I love Chicago. I lived in New York for 2 years, and it's great, but I love, there's something about Chicago that is a big city with a Midwest feel. It's a big city with a friendlier approach, but I love that whole Michigan Avenue area and along the waterfront and things like that. I love Chicago.
Awesome. Well, good answers. Well, again, we're going to do our deep dive on winning at country radio. But Clay, thank you so much for taking the time to come by the podcast. It's just amazing to hear your story.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
It's awesome. Hey, what's up? Thanks for hanging out on this YouTube video with us. In case you didn't know, this is from the Made It in Music podcast, Season 2. We have a ton of awesome guests that come on the show, all music business professionals, to share their knowledge and experience with you. So if you want to subscribe to not miss any future episodes, hit that subscribe button on YouTube and you'll be notified about all of them. And in case you didn't know, we do a deep dive for every episode where we go really in depth on a certain topic from each podcast episode. So sign up right here to get free unlimited access to all of those deep dives from our podcast. And if you want to watch another Made It in Music podcast video, click here.